All right, you guys. Here are our beginning notes for cell transport. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the cell membrane itself, and then also we'll end up with passive transport. And then the next video will just be covering active transport. So let's get into it. All right. So cell transport really comes down to the plasma membrane or the cell membrane. All right. It is the gatekeeper. It controls what enters and leaves. We call it semi-permeable because some things can come in and out freely. Okay. However, some things need like channel proteins and things like we got going on here. It just all kind of depends on what type of molecules are coming through inside and outside. Okay. It is made up in what we call a phospholipid bilayer. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about this in the next slide, but you have a phosphate group, you have a lipid group, and it is a two-layered thing. So that's where we get our name, phospholipid, phospho. All right, whoops. Phospho, and then the lipid. Okay. And then it is two layers, layer one, layer two, and that's where we get the name phospholipid bilayer. And it's also, we use this term fluid mosaic model because it has all these kind of things that are structured throughout here. So you remember from a mosaic, if you've ever seen a stained glass window, it's a bunch of different pieces put together. However, different from a stained glass window, which is fixed and stationary and not moving, right, static. All right, we have a very dynamic flow. So this little guy right here, this channel protein that I've been kind of drawing on, is not sedentary, meaning it's not staying here. It is moving around throughout the cell, going this way, maybe going back that way, going over here, going over there. All right, it's moving all around. So that's where we get the fluid mosaic because it's made up of a lot of parts model. All right, a little bit more about that phospholipid bilayer. Whoops. So a little bit more about that phospholipid bilayer. Like I said, the head is polar or charged, right? If it's polar, that means it's going to like what? Water. All right, remember, we got little positives back here, little negatives up here. All right, I'm just not drawing the slightly symbol because you can't see it. But what's actually crazy is water's attracted to this portion. All right, it'll shoot in here and it'll get to like right here. It's like, ah, crap, I don't like it here because then by then it is into the tail portion, which is nonpolar, which as we talked about, oil and water don't mix. And then it kind of shoots, it shoots on through all the way out to the other side. Okay. So water, as we'll talk about in a minute, does osmosis, which I know you've heard that term before. Okay. So we have this phosphate portion, we have the hydrophilic, hydro-loving portion on the outside. On the inside, this blue layer is going to be our hydrophobic portion. So like I said, water will shoot in, get about halfway, and like, ah, crap, right? And it keeps going out the other way. And there, once again, this fluid mosaic model. So like I was speaking of previously, these things will move around throughout. They're not stationary. This not like they're stop signs that are embedded in concrete and aren't going anywhere. They're going to move. They're going to jostle around, and things like that. Last little sketch. All right. You got cholesterols, carbohydrates, you got proteins, which help regulate movement, which we'll talk more about. All right. Two main types. So nothing else really to talk about here too much. You got cholesterols, you got carbohydrates in there, you got some proteins. The proteins we're going to talk about at length when we talk about active transport and facilitated diffusion. So, all right. So we got two main types of transport. We got passive. Big thing here is it requires no energy. Active transport. All right. Big thing here is it requires energy. So passive All right, let's say an example like this. All right, I got a ball sitting right here on the hill. If I want it to roll down the hill, I don't have to do much of anything. I just let it do its thing and it rolls downhill. No energy is required out of me. But, right, I got a ball down this hill. Even if I want to throw it, people are like, oh, just throw it up the hill. Okay, well, it's still going to require you energy to throw it up the hill or push it up the hill, depending on whichever example we're talking about. So we're going to talk about all these examples, but the main part is you got passive, no energy, active, requires energy. All right, so we got three types with passive transport. We got diffusion, okay, any particle, right? Osmosis, essentially just diffusion of water, and facilitated diffusion, ions and things like that that can't just move across without some kind of passage. All right, so diffusion is just the movement of particles, molecules, from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration. So they move with the concentration gradient. So right here we got an example of we just put a whole bunch of, let's say, bouncy balls, all right, into this little room. They're all bouncing around like crazy. All right, it's very, very cramped, very, very tight, just hundreds of them bouncing. We open this door, over time, we're going to get an influx and then an equilibrium when the concentration is equal on both sides. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we got 8 over here and 8 over here. That looks like 18. Okay. So now we're even. Now that what will happen is one ball might come over here, like this one might come over, and this one might go back. This is called a static equilibrium, where they keep moving back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, but they keep that equilibrium. So right here in this bottom example, we have a whole bunch of food coloring, okay, most likely blue, all right, and you got yellow liquid here. So what happens is the blue starts to filter down, starts to disperse, starts to diffuse into the yellow liquid, and you've got this little green layer, and over, if we just, from the beginning over here on the left to the end over here on the right, we'll probably end up with some kind of greenish liquid once it's all spread out, or maybe even a dark green, depending on how strong this concentration is. Okay. No energy, no carrier proteins, no nothing is needed. All right. Osmosis, on the other hand, all right. Yeah, not on the other hand. Osmosis requires no energy, requires no carrier proteins, but it is only referring to water. Once again, we are going from high concentration to low concentration. So, once again, that hill example, balls up here, rolls down freely, all right? No problem whatsoever. Now, there's the three other terms we're going to need to know when we talk about osmotic pressure and osmosis. Okay, we have hypotonic, hypertonic, and isotonic. Okay, this is referring to the net movement of water. Okay, net movement of water. So all these terms are referring to this net movement of water. Okay, so in a hypotonic solution, the net movement of water is into a cell. Let me erase a little bit of this stuff that we got here. Okay. So the net movement here is into the cell. That means the cell's going to get fatter or swell. Okay. Hypertonic, on the other hand, we have a net movement out of it, so it's going to shrink or get skinny. All right. And then isotonic, we have no net movement. It's overall the exact same, so it stays the same. All right, good. All right, last but not least, passive transport, or the last type of passive transport is facilitated diffusion. All right, this guy uses a helper protein to get from one side to the other. All right, it still requires no energy. All right, no energy is required. You don't see any ATP being used here, but we do need a helper protein to get something from one side to the other. Okay, so we're still moving from area high to low. So once again, still moving from high to low. All right, no energy. All right, but this time we do need a carrier protein. All right, so quick on this, dynamic equilibrium means that we have particles moving in and out, but there's no net change. So you see water coming in here, going out there, but this level will not change. So that's just a dynamic equilibrium. Okay. And that is my cue to stop. We're done with this video. If you have any questions, please fill out the form that comes, that's attached to the Google assignment. I'll be happy to answer them as I look over them and as I review these notes tomorrow in class. Thank you very much, guys.